Hi, Theresa.
Hi, Betty.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
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 Good. Me
Yeah.
too. So, Theresa, tell us about you.
Well, I am a storyteller, and I say that because I have embraced this title for myself, and it's taken me a really long time to embrace it. I spent about, oh gosh, a dozen or so years in corporate America doing adult learning as well as training and facilitation. I've been in sales forever. I think I've sold everything there is to sell except cars.
Mhm.
And finally, about 4 years ago, I stepped out on my own to start my own company, Why Storyworks, where I help people tell the right story at the right time to the right audience to get the right results.
That's
So,
awesome. That's awesome.
yeah.
So, what would you say are some of your biggest accomplishments in life and even in work?
Well, I mean, it goes without saying, I got two daughters, and they're adults. They're 18 and 21. They turned this year. And I have a relationship of 25 years
Wow.
to a man that I never thought I'd be, you know, is bizarre to me, but I feel like sometimes I didn't think we'd make it past 25 minutes. And so that to me is a really big accomplishment to
Mhm.
have a sustaining relationship and to have two adult children that are on their way to adulting. And other accomplishments include playwriting. My first play ran for 5 years in Baltimore, Maryland when I wrote it. And it also, I produced it in New York City. I have a master's in performance. I have a certification in adult learning. I have an undergraduate in theater. Like I said, I've spent about a dozen years in corporate America. So, the accomplishment thing, I think it's more about just trying to make it,
Uh-huh.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
So I think for me, accomplishing is feeling satisfied,
Mhm.
feeling okay,
Yeah.
feeling happy and healthy. And I'm still working on it. So
Sure.
I don't know if I've really accomplished that,
That's
to
all right.
tell you the
It's a work
truth.
in progress
And
for
if you,
sure.
yeah, and if you had talked to me yesterday, I really wouldn't have been very good. I was down the rabbit hole yesterday, full
Uh-huh.
on imposter
Uh-huh.
syndrome.
Good.
So
We'll
there you
talk about
go.
that in just a minute.
Yeah.
Before we do, I have one more question about you, and that is, what would others say about you? So I asked you about your accomplishments. What would other people say are your biggest accomplishments?
Um, you know, it's funny because my instincts tell me that they would say, in fact, I was getting my hair done yesterday with my hairdresser, now you talk to your hairdresser. I've known her for over 10 years. And she's like, your superpower is helping people tell their story. That's your superpower. And I don't even know that I like that word superpower. It feels really dated.
Mhm.
And some people say, I can interrogate people. I really don't try to, but my thing is I'm really interested in other people's stories. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I just really dig getting to know people. And I mean, I'll talk to the waiter, I'll talk to strangers, I'll return things that, people hate doing that kind of stuff. I have no problem with
Yeah.
it. So yeah, I guess that would be what people might say
That's what
about
they
me
would
is,
say. Yeah.
yeah, I like to talk and I like to hear other people talk.
Yeah.
So
Nothing.
I guess I'm kind of good at being an
Yeah,
instructor.
there's nothing wrong with that. I'm gonna pause for a
Yeah.
second because you do have lines on your face now. It's really
Okay.
funny
Let me roll
because
the shades.
yeah, go ahead. Go
Yeah.
ahead. It wasn't there, and then it was there, and then it wasn't there. There we go.
Is that better?
That's better. Yeah. Um,
How's the lighting? Is
it's
it
great.
okay?
It's perfect now. I'd say start over, but I
Okay.
don't want to. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, what has been your experience with imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome, I can think about the very first time I felt it, which was when I was 6 years old and I was standing on stage. I was chosen to be the narrator for a puppet show we were doing, Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Hmm.
And Mrs. Campen, my first grade teacher, chose me because she said I had the biggest mouth.
Wow.
And so my job was to say, and she said, and he said, and the puppets would go, blah, blah, blah. And at one point, the woman or the gal who was playing Mama Bear took everybody back into the living room when we're supposed to go upstairs to find Goldilocks. And I'm like, this cannot do.
Mhm.
So I'm like, excuse me. She meant to say, let's go upstairs. Now, everybody in the audience is laughing their head off. And I'm like, what is going on? And the girl who's playing Mama Bear is, she's crying, her puppet thing. And I get off stage and they're like, you saved the show. You did it. Amazing. And there were like 700 people in the audience. I'm a first grader. I went to parochial school, first through eighth grade,
Yeah.
So this is the variety show and we're the first act and I'm there in my little pigtails. And so they're like, you are amazing. And I'm like, really? I was? All I did was just get them upstairs because, the show must go
Right,
on.
right.
And so, yeah.
So what were their feelings then of imposter syndrome?
I just didn't. I'm like, I don't know what the big deal
Uh-huh.
is. I was just doing what I do.
Did what I said.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't do that? The show must
The
go on. You've
shows.
got to get upstairs. You have to get to the climax. There is no way, as the narrator, I'm going to let this thing go sideways.
Yeah.
I'm going to take
I
it. I'm
mean,
going to
if
get
they
us up
don't
there.
find Goldilocks, there is no story.
There is no
Yeah.
story, right?
Yeah.
So, that was kind of a defining moment for me. And I've been telling stories ever since. But I think that there's this, it comes so easily for me that I question it.
Yeah.
And also sales. I've been in sales forever. Like I said, I think I've sold everything there is to sell.
Uh-huh.
And it's so easy. So I think there must be something wrong because it's so easy. And so now, instead of teaching people or helping people sell whatever widget might, whatever it is they're selling,
Yeah.
I help people sell themselves. And I think, oh, there must be something wrong with this. Because it's a
It's too
no-brainer.
easy. Uh-huh.
It's easy for me to listen and pull out their story, right?
Sure.
But I'm like, when's it going to get really hard? And well, the hard part is, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and
Yes.
let me go hire my storyteller. I
So
mean, that's
so
what
it's
we need.
your fault we're here because you asked the question, when's it going to get really hard? So thanks a lot, Theresa, for throwing us into this pandemic. We finally figured it out, folks. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but really though,
yeah.
so are those the only times you've experienced imposter syndrome? Is it something you
Oh no, I
still?
experienced it yesterday.
Oh,
I was in my bed and I was crying in my soup because my birthday is Friday. And I'm going to be in the middle of a very auspicious decade, and
uh-huh.
I'm not going to tell you which decade that
Okay.
is, but safe to say in 5 years I'll make a very big milestone.
Okay.
Um, and I was feeling like I had wasted my life, and who am I, and what do I think I'm doing? How can I run not one but two businesses? Because I also manage my husband's construction business on the side, in addition to raising two daughters and trying to run my own business and
Yeah.
teach and, create content and all those other things. So I'm like, you've wasted your life. You haven't done anything. You're not of value. You don't make anything. Who do you think you are? And I was supposed to have a meeting with my creativity cohort, which I started with a couple colleagues. And I'm like, I can't show up like this. My eyes are all puffy. I'm like, I'll just say I have allergies. I'll just It's allergies.
Did it work?
And as it turned out, the other two couldn't make it, and we postponed it for today. And thank God, because I'm in a much better place
Yeah.
today. So
So
yeah.
when you're in that space, I mean, you told us, I'm assuming that all those things that you said are the thoughts that you're having. Are you having like
Mhm.
any type of emotion or physical response? I mean, you said you were crying,
Yeah.
or
Well,
maybe.
the night before, I couldn't sleep. I mean, I get insomnia.
Mhm.
I get really tired, very lethargic. It's like I'm in quicksand, or I call it I'm down the rabbit hole. I won't answer my phone. I don't answer texts, and then I lie about it. I say, "Oh, well, my phone was not charged," and sometimes that's true.
Uh-huh.
But
But sometimes
sometimes
you
I'm just
just
sitting on.
didn't want to answer
Yeah,
it.
I'm just in my comfy chair watching Don Lemon.
Yeah.
So unable to move. And I've got some things that I know will pull me out of it. Like I've got some really great friends that I'm incredibly transparent with, and my sisters, of course. And I've got some toys that
Mhm.
I pull out when I need them. Like I've got my I don't know if you can
Oh,
see
it's
this,
the
but my
Cowardly Lion.
yeah, the Cowardly Lion
Yeah.
who says, get your head in the game. Quit being a baby. Or I've got this guy here who says, "Time's up. That's it. We're done with this.
Is
Get out of the
is
house.
that
Time to move
is that
on."
who is
My
that? Is that Dick
That
Tracy?
it's Dick Tracy, yeah.
Yeah.
But usually I'm just kind of down the rabbit hole when I'm in that space, and I just gotta say, forget about it. And sometimes I just curl up with my comfy blanket, which I have right here, or I'll open the window and I'll let the cold air and I'll turn off all the heat. And I say it's because we have to air out the house.
Yeah.
It's old timey stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because of this pandemic. But no, the truth is really I just need a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Um, and usually if I go for a walk, I walk my dog, that'll help.
Mhm.
And I'll do a walkie-talkie. I'll call somebody, or I'll just walk by myself and talk myself out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So I feel like that movie with Annette Bening and Kevin Spacey. She was American Beauty,
mm,
where she's in front of the screen door
yeah.
and she's in the house and she's like, shut it, like get it together. It's like sometimes it's like I have to will myself with like a steel rod to get it together.
So you've got your Cowardly Lion and your Dick Tracy and your cute little bunny. You've got some great friends and you go for a walk. Anything else that you do that makes it better?
Just coming clean, crying for sure. And just sometimes doing nothing, like watching TV. I hate to say it, but sometimes when I'm in the rabbit hole,
Uh-huh.
in that monkey mind, or what I call the cop in the head, and the cop in the head will write me a ticket every single time,
Mhm.
telling me you're not worthy, you're not enough, who do you think you are? You're too big, you're too bold, you're too old. Your teeth have spread along with everything else. What the hell,
You're so
right?
funny.
And why did you think going gray was a good
Yeah.
idea?
Who
Okay,
told you that
I
was a
mean,
good idea? Yeah.
thank God we're doing this meeting today and not yesterday because it had been way too long since I saw my hairstylist. But there's, um, sometimes I just need to be in the soup, and it usually takes me about 24 hours or so max. Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
I think that's very vulnerable. I appreciate you sharing all of that because I think many of us feel all of those things. I love the analogy of the cop writing you a ticket. And you just have to, I mean, there's no fight in City Hall, right? You just have to take it and swallow it and move on. And I like that analogy a lot. What would you share
Hmm.
with somebody who is experiencing imposter syndrome right now?
Um, it's a tricky question because I feel my instincts tell me, and this I'm kind of mad about this word because I feel as if it belongs to Karen. You know what I'm
Huh?
saying? White privileged women. And I'm like, are you a Karen? Quit being Karen. Shut the fuck up. Move on. Get over yourself. You are lucky you can feel so imposterish. It's like seriously, there are people dying on the street. There are people who are homeless. There are people who have no jobs. You've got a great house, two great kids. You're trying to live your dream. What the heck is your problem?
Mm-hmm.
So part of me is like, get a real problem, get a real life, get something real to be upset about, because this imposter syndrome it's that's just
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. And then I have to say, well, thanks for the judgment, T.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
you can yeah, go over there now.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times I'll just say, just read or write or get into your creativity, because I find sometimes that inspiration will annihilate imposter syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just got finished reading Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, which I adore.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks a lot about how Yeah, I love this analogy. She says she's going to go for a ride in the car with creativity and fear. And she says fear can have can sit in the car and they can be in the back seat, but they absolutely are forbidden to drive, and absolutely they don't get to say where we're going.
Hmm.
So sometimes imposter syndrome needs to have a voice, and don't let it drive because it'll drive you crazy.
Yeah,
And it's a lie. It's the big lie for yourself. And so if we are fortunate enough, if I'm fortunate enough to even indulge this fantasy of an imposter's syndrome, then just let it have its say in the back seat and tell it to knock it off. They're not driving, and they're not going to change the station on the radio, and they don't get a vote.
that's right.
They can have a voice, but they certainly don't get a
Yeah.
vote.
I think that's awesome. Maybe not the settle down Karen part, but like the rest of it I liked. But I get it, like, because you're coming from a place of this as if I were talking to myself, and we can
Mm-hmm.
be sort of irreverent and unempathetic with ourselves. But then when it comes down to other
Mm-hmm.
people, we're like, okay, I mean, I get it, but you got to
Mm-hmm.
find a way to put it in the back seat, just like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
go away. There's
No.
hope to cope, but it
Mm.
doesn't necessarily go away. So you might as well invite it to sit down beside you. Just let it know that you know what it's up to.
Well, it's funny because another moment really sticks out in my brain. When I wrote my first play,
Hmm.
I was really young, and it had this wild success, unbeknownst to me. I didn't write it to be successful. It resonated with people, and it was. And I remember sitting in the auditorium, and as an author, nobody knows who you are. You see the actor, but
Right.
nobody knows that you're the
Hmm.
authoress or whatever. And I was really young, and I remember thinking, there are 300 people listening to me, and I'm not saying a word. And I remember going through the lobby and hearing people say, "It's like there was a tape recorder in my living room," or the piece was about addiction and families. It was called Family Masks, and it took a look at the 6 basic archetypes you see in family systems theory. And there were masks, and it was a movement theater piece, blah, blah. And so there were a lot of people in the theater who had never seen a play before.
Mm.
And after the play, they'd all kind of hang out. It was almost like an AA meeting for people.
Yeah.
And I remember going to what we called the rooms, because I was in recovery as a ACOA, adult child of an alcoholic, or CODA, Codependence Anonymous. I'm like 22, 23. And people were like, "I went to see this play last night and it blew my mind." And I'm like, "I wrote that play." And after a while, I stopped telling people that I wrote it because people wouldn't believe me.
Hmm.
Like, "No
Yeah.
way, you didn't write that." And for the longest time, I thought I'd never write anything else, or that play would eclipse me. And, what's Andy Warhol say? When everyone gets their 15 minutes. And I remember I was dating somebody at the time, and he was like, "Yeah, that play, man. Whew." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, just so long as, 25 years from now, that's not the best thing you ever did." Shut the,
Well, I'm really
asshole.
glad that you
Thanks,
didn't marry
actually.
him.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because sometimes, and I'm staring at, I have a copy of the poster framed in my office right now. I'm looking at it, and I wonder sometimes, was that it? Was that my big moment? Will I ever, And I've written, 4 plays since then. I did a one-woman show when I was 9 months pregnant with my second daughter at the Seattle Fringe Festival called Mrs. Pancake America. It was all about how when we become mothers, we become our mothers, even though we don't want to become our mothers.
Hmm.
Because my mother was a beauty queen. She was Mrs. Pancake America in 1967. It's a long story. But anyway, I think there's this need to try to eclipse or try to be better than our parents, and feeling as if I'll never ever measure up. And my mother was so beautiful and dynamic, and such a dynamic salesperson, and also tragically flawed.
Hmm.
So it's just, I don't even remember what the question was that you asked me, and I'm kind of going on and on. But I think this idea that even though I could have a play that people resonated with, and it was successful, and it was truthful, and it ran for 5 years, and I've done other things, I still don't believe that I'm an authoress or a
Mhm.
storyteller, or I'm not worthy. And who's going to want to pay somebody to be a storyteller? It just seems like a weird profession. What am I going to put that on my tax returns? Profession, storyteller. It's like,
I mean, you could put it on there. It might get you audited, you never know. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that story about the play. I think that that really resonates with me, and it will resonate with others. Um, so I have one more question for you, Theresa, and that is, why did you want to be part of this imposter syndrome project? What made you say, yes, pick me?
well, quite honestly, my buddy Aaron Peterschnick,
Yeah.
whom I really value her opinion, and then you and I met briefly
Yes.
through Lunapalooza, and I'm like, I dig that chick. I want to be involved with something she's involved in. And yeah, I feel that. And also, I do think that it is a privilege. I think it's a white privileged term. And I could be wrong about that. And I don't know what your research is going to uncover. And I really wanted to say, I'm sorry. I don't know. But I just I feel bad that I am taking up the oxygen in the room with something that is a phenomenon that doesn't need to be.
Yeah. Spoken like
So
someone with imposter syndrome. Feeling like an imposter on an imposter syndrome podcast. So thank you
the
for
frame of
demonstrating.
the frame.
Thank you for
It's
demonstrating
so
it.
performance
It's
studies of
very
me.
inception of you. Yes.
Yeah, my master's degree from NYU in performance studies. My theater people would think that that was like, oh, they would get off on that theory.
But you know what, though? I think that there are other people that feel that way too, that their imposter syndrome becomes imposter syndrome about their imposter syndrome. I mean, you're not the first person that I've interviewed that has said, um, I feel like an imposter talking about imposter syndrome because who am I? And that's why I'm so grateful. And we're all very grateful and appreciative that you were vulnerable and you were willing to share your story. So thank you so much, Theresa.
You're welcome. Thank you, Betty.
If you like this series and you want to show support, go to buymeacoffee.com/ifyouaskbetty to learn more about how you can support this and future If You Ask Betty projects.